Radio for Justice brings you up to the minute. News and conversation around the criminal legal system in Colorado and beyond. Welcome to Up to the Minute.
Welcome to Up to the Minute on Colorado Radio for Justice. My name is JoyBelle Phelan. Today, we're at the Colorado Criminal Justice Reform Coalition, and we're with Manige. Welcome to Up to the Minute.
Hey, my name's Manige. I am the community organizer here at Colorado Criminal Justice Reform Coalition, and I am working with Kyle on the No More Prisons Coalition.
So why don't I'm going to go backward just for a little bit. If this is somebody's first time listening, they're not aware of what No More Prisons is, they're maybe not aware of what CCJRC is, let's give a little bit of context. In a very broad strokes, who is CCJRC?
CCJRC has been around since the 1900s, and we have been working to reduce the overuse of the criminal legal system here in Colorado.
And so we'll also add in, for folks that also might not know, there are 21 state-run prisons in Colorado. Well, 2 of them are private. The rest of them are what we refer to as the Colorado Department of Corrections. And so when we're talking about No More Prisons, we're talking specifically about state-run prisons or jails as well.
We are referring specifically to prisons, not jail.
Okay. So for folks that might be, this is your first episode, jails are typically, not always, but we're doing sweeping broad strokes today. Jails are typically where someone is held before they are convicted, or maybe if they have misdemeanors, they're not necessarily felonies or longer term prison sentences. Once someone is convicted and then, sentenced to the Department of Corrections is when the prison experience and sentence begins. So why no more prisons?
Well, we have our 2026 budget that is currently being worked on at the state level, and we're all having to tighten our buckles here. The deal is that we're at almost a $1 billion budget shortfall in our state, and DOC is asking for over $1 million to open up bed capacity. And they've already received over $1 million, and that's in addition to their regular budget. So even though it's not typical that we tell the Department of Corrections no, it's time that they follow the rules like the rest of us, and they actually have some tools available to them. Since 2018, the prison population management measures that they can use to manage their prison population as an internal policy. And so the fact that they're not following those and using those tools available to them and instead putting the cost on your average Coloradan when we're at such a huge budget shortfall is problematic, and we're not here to stand for that.
So the Department of Corrections already gets $1.2 billion with a B.
With a B, a capital B.
Capital B for their annual budget funded by taxpayers. You just mentioned they asked for and received
an additional $1 million back in June. Now they are going to be going to the Joint Budget Committee and asking for an additional $2.8 million to finish up the year before we even get to the 2026 budget.
So that's in the current year. They're basically wanting to add 2.8 plus 1. So they're basically adding almost $4 million for beds.
Without using the prison population management measures, which are free.
So let's talk about that for a minute. There are only so many beds, right, across these 21 correctional facilities. So what is this 2018 bill you're talking about, and what do you mean by they have measures to use that they aren't using?
Yeah, so the Department of Corrections has these options when their bed capacity reaches 3% or less for 30 or more days. So that basically means, hey, we're running out of beds, and we've been running out of beds for a month and counting. So now we need to manage our population. And that's what triggers the PPMM, the Prison Population Management Measures. So what those look like is people who are already eligible for parole might get a second look. It doesn't force anybody out. It doesn't force DOC's hand, but it requires them to take a second look. And it's policies like that that help them say, hey, this person's already eligible for parole and we're running out of beds. So we need this bed for somebody who's starting their sentence, not somebody who's, in theory, already eligible to be done with it. It also encourages them to move people into community corrections, so halfway houses and things like that. And that's another way to open up some capacity.
Right. And you mentioned it just briefly, but I want to reiterate for folks that might be concerned about public safety, this 2018 bill does not require that anyone be moved out of prison, but it does ask that we look at those folks who, like you mentioned, have already been approved for parole. Maybe they're waiting on a parole plan, like somewhere to go. They're maybe close to being applying or being approved for community correction. So this doesn't necessarily make them do anything, but it does ask them to take another look at, could they open up some beds?
Absolutely. And one of the requirements is that these folks are low risk. So we're not including people that are at a much higher risk to the community to be a part of this.
Okay. So you've said they are not utilizing this measure. So what sort of things are you all seeing here and on Capitol Hill that are making you worry that they might be asking to open up another prison?
So we saw this coming, right? We can see that the bed capacity was trending in the wrong direction, that it was filling up and DOC wasn't doing anything to manage it. In June, when they asked for the $1 million, that was our first cue that, hey, this is getting to the point where they're going to start asking for more money. And this is getting to the point where the sheriffs in various counties have actually signed a letter and saying, hey, we've got all these people that have been sentenced to the Department of Corrections who the Department of Corrections isn't taking.
Yep.
And they're like, we're not getting paid enough to even care for these people, but we also can't release them because they've been sentenced to the Department of Corrections. The Department of Corrections isn't taking them, so it's still on us. And this isn't fair either because that's taxing the individual counties.
Right.
So the prison backlog, we saw all of this coming over the last several months. And then in June, when they asked for the extra $1 million, that was like, okay, so now they're going to do something, but what they're doing is asking for more beds, not using these population management measures that are available to them. Then we got word that they are going to be asking for $2.8 additional $1 million on Monday, the 22nd, of the Joint Budget Committee to open up more bed capacity, again, without fully utilizing those population management measures. And that is very clearly trending to DOC saying, hey, we just don't have enough beds. We're going to need a whole new facility.
So I'm curious, I remember in the last legislative session, one of the laws that got signed into being was basically, I'm sorry, I do not remember the number.
I never remember the numbers either.
Okay, great. So it was the, thank you. So it was the one where, in the interest of public safety, we are expanding the amount of time people are spending in prison. So they're no longer getting the same amount, I think it is, of earned time. And so basically, so when I was in prison, basically your earned time and your good time, your sentence got cut in half. And then to set your parole eligibility date, and then you earn for different classes and good behavior and stuff you were supposed to be doing, you got some extra time off of that sentence. Now, instead of it being 50% that your time was cut, it's now only 75%. So people are, in essence, spending longer in prison on the same sentence. I'm curious, coupled with that, this asking for a whole lot more money because they don't have enough beds, like, this is only the start of the problem we're about to see.
Absolutely. And that is one of the things that, you know, nothing's an inevitability, but we anticipate being another reason that they're asking for a whole new facility, not just several $1 million.
And even if they, said they were going to save money by reopening a facility, that's going to cost money to retrofit. Kyle is
Totally.
now sneaking in. Hi, Kyle.
Hello.
So we've been talking a little bit about the history of how much money the DOC already gets, how much money they just got, how much money they're about to ask for, why this is necessary, what y'all have been seeing that sort of makes you, know this is happening. So Manige referenced very briefly, there is a joint budget committee meeting on Monday. Why does this meeting matter?
So on Monday, the Joint Budget Committee is meeting, and they are going to give authorization to the Department of Corrections to overspend on their budget so they can grab up the remainder of the private prison beds in Colorado, the medium security. So it really matters that we show up as a community to make it really clear that we want to choose teachers over prisons, and we want to choose healthcare for children over prisons. So they're requesting another $2.7 million for these prison beds, and it's going to be all hands on deck to show up on Monday to be like, hey, no thanks. This is going to be a big fight through, I think, the whole legislative session, not only just now, but maybe again in December. Might be another issue, but definitely in January, we're worried that we're going to see the ask for the new prison. Or at least to start a study for a new prison. But they can buy up an old prison, an old private one, but they got to fix it. They got to bring it back up to standards. They have to make sure...
Staff it.
Staff it? What's that? DOC has an 18% vacancy right across all staffing right now. And so the cheapest one is down in Colorado Springs. It's about $38 million, but that was like 5 years ago. And private prisons are kind of a hot commodity these days for the Immigration Detention Center. So I think that price is going to go up. Mm-hmm. And then right now we're only sending 23 people a month in this state to prison.
Okay.
And so if we can just get each judicial district to not send 2 people to prison and place them back in community, place them in an alternative, we have the ability to neutralize the prison growth in Colorado. Mm-hmm. And so buying a new prison isn't the answer, especially when the state has minus $10 and 7 raspberries to figure out how to fix Medicaid.
Well, and it's like we've talked about for those of you that have been listening to Up to the Minute from the beginning, like one of the things Christy Donner used to always talk about was at some point we have to make decisions about what we're funding. Are we funding prisons or are we funding educations, right? And so this very much falls in line with what CCJRC has always advocated for.
Yeah.
And I don't know, do you remember, if I remember right, the last prison that got built was Centennial.
Correct, CSP2.
And the only reason it got built is because they lumped it in with a football stadium bill.
Yeah, that is correct. That's well done. That was how they got everyone to vote for it.
Yeah.
It was like, well, we want the stadium, that's all together. And they took out a loan, but they called it something else. So we sued saying, hey, this is a violation of Tabor. You can't take a loan out. And they're like, well, it's not a loan. It's like an IOU, but like kind of nicer than a loan. And the courts ruled against us. Right. So by the time they were done building it and the contractors dropped out of building CSP2, so then DOC had to manage that themselves, and that was a nightmare. So by the time it got built, it was only open for a smidge of time, and then it closed. It's reopened right now because all the guys from Sterling that are getting remodeled are down there, but they're going right back up. It cost $172,000 a cell to build that prison, and that's pretty old numbers. And so with inflation and everything, I can only imagine what it would cost right now. On the ballot initiative for the fentanyl, they're saying it's going to cost $150 million in prison expansion. $150 million. Adults don't need dental care. Kids don't need clean water, but $150 million for prisons.
Who needs higher ed?
Who needs higher ed? Get a degree. That's a joke. Everyone, please go to college if you want to. If you don't go to trade school.
Right, do
I was going to
something
say
else.
trades are good too.
Trades are good too. But it sort of also makes me think, like, historically as a state, we don't want to open more prisons. Yeah. And I also want to educate folks that don't know, like somebody out there right now is going to say, but we're not in legislative session. What do you mean there's a meeting on Monday? Why now? What's the flow? Because the session doesn't start till January. So why are we worried about this right now?
Totally. So So everyone's right. There's no session right now, but departments are allowed to come in and ask for what's called a supplemental to their budget throughout the year. It can either be on an emergency status, or they can come once a quarter and be like, hey, we need more money for this, or we need to transfer money from this one to this one to pay for this.
Okay.
And so the JBC doesn't actually give them that money. What they do is approve their ability to either overspend or just move stuff around within their own budgets. So that means they go ahead and like, yeah, you're cool, dude. Go ahead and spend that money. And then they have to come back during the legislative session and run a bill to approve that, because all money has to be accounted for and approved by the legislature. So even if we fall short on Monday of getting the Joint Budget Committee folks to deny DOC's request, we got another bite on this coming up next legislative session to be like, argue our case to the whole body of the House and the Senate to not approve this. So it's just this weird, they're kind of, in my opinion, like a fourth branch of government, just JBC. It's only 6 of them, and we only need to win over 3 of them.
Okay. So the Joint Budget Committee meets on Monday. What is the call to action?
On Monday, we want you to show up. We want to pack the room because there is very little else that will sway them that community doesn't support this than every single seat being filled. So everybody's going to show up at 10 o'clock in the morning at the JBC hearing room, which is 200 East 14th Avenue. It's on the 3rd floor. And we're not asking anybody to say anything. In fact, there's not actually an opportunity to say anything. There's no testimony. We'll have buttons, and we'll sit there and be present in solidarity with the fact that we don't support a prison over, I don't know, clean water for education. Well, clean water for children or higher education.
There you go.
Education and children.
So do people need to register in advance? Do they need to sign up to be allowed in the building? Like, what does that process look like?
So we do have a RSVP that will be on our website. However, you can just show up. We'll be there. You don't have to have a registration to get in the building or anything. Head up to the 3rd floor, and we'll be there waiting for you at the doors at 10 o'clock in the morning with some buttons so that they know why you're there.
Okay, great. Is there anything that you feel like we've missed or that we need to go over or that we need to remind anybody of?
What is JBC?
The Joint Budget Committee is it is like Judiciary Committee or House Education. You know, there's all these different committees. Joint Budget Committee are the group of 6 legislators that write the budget for the state. So they listen to everybody. All the different departments come present to them, and they're the ones that send it to the House or the Senate and get things through, and they're everyone's either favorite or least favorite members of the legislature. So
right, like if folks remember from last summer when we were talking about saving Skyline and wanting to make sure that we weren't closing down a prison, it was the Joint Budget Committee that ultimately was listening to people's experiences, listening to what Skyline and the Beacon program were all about. Like this was the group of people that were essentially saying yay or nay to either making sure if something had to close, was it going to be Delta, Rifle, or Skyline? So this is the group of people. They actually hold an immense amount of power in our legislature.
4th branch of the government.
All right. So the meeting on Monday, September 22nd at 10 a.m. at the Joint Budget Committee hearing room at 200 East 14th Avenue, which is on the 3rd floor.
And if you have more questions or want to stay involved, you can always find us at CCJRC.org under Get Involved. And right there at the top is the No More Prisons Coalition. We have our fact sheet, we have our coalition sign up, and anything else your heart could desire.
Well, I think that's enough. I think we're about out of time for today. So thank you, Manige. Thank you, Kyle, for your time and your insight. It is up to the minute. And again, I am JoyBelle Phelan, and we will see you next time on Colorado Radio for Justice.
Up to the Minute is a production of Colorado Radio for Justice, Tune into our 24/7 broadcast on www.radioforjustice.org. Listen on the app from the App Store and Google Play. Catch this show and other original works shifting the narrative on the criminal legal system on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Colorado Radio for Justice.